So Bridget asked me a question, which was, good or bad, can you talk about your past experiences, what you learned, and how you would do things differently in today's market? And this is specifically in relation to flips and buying rentals. What I can say is every single time that we've lost money, it was because we had FOMO about a deal, thinking that we would never find another deal that good ever again, which obviously is kind of silly. And every time that we allowed ourselves to get emotional about the purchase or the property or even the price that we're buying it for, we ended up basically losing money on it. And so there will always be another deal out there for you, and you have to have really strong convictions and understand your buying box, because everything else then becomes a distraction. And I know that it's really easy to fall into this trap of, well, I think that I should do it because it's not like I'm working on anything else, and then you fall into that trap. Or you might say, well, if I can save money here, or if I can cut costs on labor and materials here, if I just do a basic cleanup, I think that I can make money. That's also another thing, trying to force the deal to work even when it doesn't really pencil out. And so I think you have to have some good checkpoints or systems in place to know whether or not, this is a deal that you should really move forward on. I think one of those checkpoints for me is, although I don't consider myself to be a wholesaler, I can't possibly close on every single thing that falls into my lap. And so if I send a particular property out to, let's say, I don't know, my dispo list, let's say, and if nobody wants it, that's usually going to be the biggest red flag. Now, I have every intention of closing on every single property that I market out to, but again, I can't possibly close on everything. So that's probably the biggest thing for me. Now, looking a little bit broader though, I think knowing what I know today, I think a hugely underrated skill set is knowing how to build a database and also manage that database. Now, if your goal is to really just do 1 or 2 flips or buy 1 or 2 rentals every single year, I don't think that this is going to really matter. But if you want to make $1 million in a year, I think this is something that you absolutely need to take seriously. I think if you're still in the beginning stages, or if you're trying to buy 1 or 2 properties a year, the action is going to be way more important. So sending out your letters, knocking on doors, making those phone calls, reaching out to people in your sphere of influence, that is going to be exponentially way more important. And imperfect action will always be better than perfect inaction. Now, if on the other hand, you're really trying to scale up, again, hit that 7-figure mark, then I think having that database and managing it is going to be, pretty important. I can tell you that from every single contact that we've made or every record that we have, everyone that's told us that they're not interested in selling, I also know that about 20% of those people will still end up selling. And so I need to have a system in place where I'm following up with those people, even the ones that tell me that they're not interested. Now, the only exception to that rule is if someone explicitly says, take me off of your list, never contact me again. Those are the people that I take off, and I respect their wishes. But if it's a pretty pleasant conversation and they just simply tell me that they're not interested, generally that person will still stay in my database, and I will be reaching out to that person at some time in the future. I also know in my database exactly how many people have gotten a letter from me. I know how many contacts that I've made. I know how many times I've door knocked that person. This is why I also don't really have a lot of heartburn about giving my secrets away or telling people about what type of property records I'm pulling, because nobody has access to my database. Everyone can go to a title company, everyone can go on PropStream and pull bulk data, but it doesn't necessarily mean that data is good or meaningful in any type of way. And so every time we make a contact, we want to make sure that we stack the odds into our favor And we want to make sure that when we make that contact, there's a reasonable probability that it's going to turn into a conversion. The other thing that I'm thinking about is, and it's somewhat related to geographic farming and building databases, but when I started my real estate business, it was 100% based on my sphere of influence. That's where I was getting the majority of people that I was working with, whether it was retail or buying investment, didn't really matter. I was working my sphere of influence. Again, and to be honest, you can make an incredible living just doing that. But if your goal is to really scale up and again, break into the 7 figures or into the high 6 figures, doesn't necessarily have to mean 7, but at some point, there's just more people out there in the world that you don't know than the people that you do know. And so you have to feel comfortable and confident going out into the world and getting new business. It's just part of the real estate business. Derek asked me a question, which was, what systems did you have to put in place in order to make everything happen in my real estate business? To be honest, I'm not really a systems-oriented person, at least not naturally. I think that everything that we've built kind of came out of necessity. So for example, I started out as a real estate broker. My buddy Jesse and I, we were doing a fair amount of retail transactions, and we thought that opening up our own firm would actually be a great way to save money. So we didn't really have the foresight that people would want to follow into what we're doing. We just thought, hey, this is a great way for us to save money, for example. Eventually, we started buying and holding rental properties. And then we found that, hey, every property management company kind of sucks. And we built the property management company, again, somewhat out of necessity to manage our own properties. I already have the appropriate license to be able to do it. I'm a managing broker. And so it was just the natural progression. Now, I don't have a retirement plan. I don't have a 401k. Pretty much everything that I own or have invested in is basically in real estate. Whether that's for better or worse, we'll find out, but that's my strategy. And when you're flipping properties, it's essentially a high-paying job. You flip something, you might make some good money, you spend it on something stupid, and then you're broke again. If I am ever to walk away from this business someday, and this is important for real estate agents too, if you ever want to walk away from this business, you have to, in my opinion, you have to buy into cash flowing properties or assets. And so we decided that we would start holding properties. And the original goal was, okay, we'll hold like 1 property a year, and that's what we're going to do. Well, 1 turned into like 10 properties the first year. And then we're wondering, well, shit, why don't we have any money now? It's because we didn't sell anything. All of the money is essentially tied up in the real estate now. So in a sense, it's kind of like a forced savings account, but it doesn't really help out with cash flow. Well, we needed to do something to alleviate the cash flow problems. And so we decided that we would start assigning more of the properties. We basically had this prospecting engine that was already in place. We can't possibly close on everything. So we decided that we would start wholesaling or assigning contracts, and we make, nearly 7 figures doing that. So that kind of came out of necessity. And again, I don't consider myself to be a wholesaler, but it's an important lane in our business, or an important revenue stream in our business. Now, coming back specifically to the systems question, it didn't really take systems per se to start anything that we're doing. Again, everything was built out of necessity, or really a pursuit for freedom. But to sustain everything, we definitely had to put some systems in place. And we had to feel comfortable delegating out some or a lot of the responsibility and finding key players that we can trust. For example, we now have 2 people that are basically on staff that operate as property managers. We now have a full-time bookkeeper. We have a full-time admin. We also now have a business manager that manages all of our database and our marketing funnel. So we had to get comfortable with finding the right people and also delegating out some of the responsibilities. So in terms of, building what we have, it didn't really take any systems per se. It was more about ambition and necessity. And then to keep everything going, we definitely had to implement some systems. I spent the last 10 years trying to learn everything that I could about real estate. And then I realized that I was a terrible business owner. And so that was kind of a rude awakening for me. And maybe a good book that I would recommend on building up your business acumen is Buy Back Your Time and Profit First. So check out those books. Maybe I'll put a affiliate link down below. If you guys like this content, if you like this more casual style, please like and subscribe. I'm relatively new to YouTube, so I'd like to get my first 100 subscribers. I'll see you on the next one.